Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. What if the most feared villain in history was actually the only one telling the truth? What if the man everyone called a demon was the one who saved them all? And what if, after being hunted, betrayed, and killed, he came back to life? This is the story of Wei Wuxian, the most dangerous cultivator to ever exist. In a world where powerful clans hunt monsters and cultivate spiritual energy, there once lived a genius, a prodigy, a rebel. His name was Wei Wuxian, but history didn't remember him as a hero. They remembered him as the Yiling Patriarch, a man who controlled the dead, a man who defied the rules of cultivation, a man who had to be destroyed. And he was. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. The story begins, not with his rise, but with his return. In a dark ritual filled with resentment and desperation, a man named Mo Xuanyu sacrifices his own body, not for power, not for revenge, but to summon someone terrifying enough to destroy his enemies. And the person who answers that call is Wei Wuxian. After 13 years of death, he opens his eyes again. But something's wrong. This isn't his body. This isn't his life. And yet, the memories come flooding back. Pain, betrayal, and a name the entire world still fears. As Wei Wuxian begins to understand his new reality, he realizes something terrifying. The world hasn't moved on. They still talk about him. They still curse his name. They still blame him for everything. Massacres, chaos, the fall of clans. Even now, years after his death, he is still the villain of their story. But here's the twist. Wei Wuxian doesn't react with anger. He laughs. Because he knows something they don't. The truth. And the truth is never as simple as good and evil. Suddenly, something strange begins happening. A spirit. A disturbance. A violent supernatural presence appears. And cultivators gather to suppress it. Wei Wuxian watches from the shadows. And what he sees? Amateurs. Even the so-called great cultivators struggle. But Wei Wuxian, he understands something they don't. Because while they use spiritual energy, he uses something forbidden. Resentful energy. The energy of the dead. And without revealing himself, he effortlessly solves the situation. Not with brute force, but with precision, experience, and something darker. And then, he appears. Lan Wanzi, one of the most powerful cultivators alive. Calm, cold, disciplined. Everything Wei Wuxian is not. But the moment they meet, something shifts. Lan Wangji stares at him. Not like a stranger, not like an enemy, but like someone who recognizes him, even in a different body, even after death. And for the first time, Wei Wuxian feels something unusual. Not fear, not danger, but unease. Now comes the real game. Wei Wuxian must hide who he is, because if anyone finds out, he won't get a second chance. So he plays the fool. Acts weak, acts clueless, acts like Mo Xuanyu. But behind that mask, he's analyzing everything. Every cultivator, every movement, every secret. Because something isn't right. The incidents happening around him feel connected. And deep down, he knows this is bigger than coincidence. As the story unfolds, we begin to see fragments of the past. A younger Wei Wuxian, bright, playful, talented, training alongside other disciples, laughing, teasing, living freely, before everything went wrong, before war, before betrayal, before he became the Yiling Patriarch. The seeds of tragedy are already there. Power struggles between clans, rigid traditions, hypocrisy hidden behind righteousness. Wei Wuxian never fit into their world. Because he asked questions. Because he broke rules. Because he refused to accept that power should only belong to the chosen. And that's what made him dangerous. Not his strength, not his abilities, but his ideas. And this is only the beginning. Because the deeper Wei Wuxian digs, the closer he gets to a truth that could destroy everything. Not just his enemies, not just the clans, but the entire system of cultivation itself. To understand Wei Wuxian's story, You need to understand the world he was born into. This isn't just a world of magic. It's a world of order. Powerful clans dominate everything. The major ones. The Lan clan, strict, disciplined, righteous. The Jiang clan, honorable, balanced. The Jin clan, wealthy, political. The Nye clan, fierce, aggressive. Each clan follows its own philosophy, its own rules, its own version of justice. But here's the truth no one says out loud. They don't fight for justice. They fight for control. And Wei Wuxian? He never belonged to any system like that. Now we go back to when everything was still simple. Wei Wuxian arrives at the cloud recesses, home of the Lan clan, a place with over 3,000 strict rules. No loud talking, no drinking, no desorden. And of course, Wei Wuxian breaks them all. Constantly. He drinks. He jokes. He mocks the rules openly. And standing right across from him is Lan Wangji, the perfect disciple. Silent, disciplined, unyielding. Where Wei Wuxian is chaos, Lan Wangji is control. And yet, these two opposites keep crossing paths. Again, and again, and again. At first it looks like conflict. Lan Wangji constantly tries to correct him, punish him, control him. But something deeper is happening. Wei Wuxian notices it first. Lan Wangji isn't just annoyed. He's watching him, studying him. And despite everything, he never truly pushes him away. There's a strange tension between them. Not hatred, not rivalry. Something quieter, something unresolved. Then comes a turning point. A night hunt. A test of skill. Students are sent to deal with supernatural threats. But things go wrong. Badly. What should have been a simple exercise turns into a life-threatening situation. And this is where Wei Wuxian shows who he really is. Not just a troublemaker. Not just a genius. But someone who can stay calm when everyone else panics. He analyzes the situation, finds the weakness, acts decisively, and saves lives. Even Lan Wangji sees it. And for the first time, his perception begins to shift. After the incident, the real conflict begins. Not physical, but philosophical. Wei Wuxian questions everything. Why are some methods forbidden? Why is resentful energy considered evil? If it can save lives, why not use it? Lan Wangji responds with tradition. Rules exist for a reason. Power corrupts. Forbidden paths lead to destruction. And this is the core of their relationship. Freedom versus discipline. Innovation versus tradition. Emotion versus control. Neither of them is completely wrong. And that's what makes it dangerous. Far away from their debates, something much worse is happening. A clan is rising. Brutal. Merciless. Dominant. The one clan. They don't care about balance. They don't care about rules. They want control. Total control. And they're strong enough to take it. One by one, they begin crushing the other clans. Turning alliances into submission. Turning resistance into ashes. And just like that, peace ends. This is where the story changes tone completely. No more training. No more school. No more rules. Only survival. The one clan attacks. Destroys. Executes. Entire sects fall overnight. Wei Wuxian and his allies are thrown into chaos. Friends become soldiers. Students become survivors. And the world becomes a battlefield. This is the moment that shapes everything. Wei Wuxian loses more than just safety. He loses stability. He loses innocence. And most importantly, he loses control over his future. Because in war, talent alone isn't enough. You need power. Real power. And the kind of power he needs doesn't exist in traditional cultivation. So he starts looking elsewhere. Somewhere darker. This is the turning point. The moment where history begins to label him a villain. Wei Wuxian begins experimenting with resentful energy. The energy of the dead. Something every cultivator is taught to fear, to avoid, to destroy. But he doesn't. He studies it, controls it, masters it. And in doing so, he becomes something no one has ever seen before. Not a traditional cultivator. Not a monster. but something in between. At first, it works perfectly. He saves people, wins battles, turns the tide of war. But power like this always has a cost. The more he uses it, the more isolated he becomes. Other cultivators fear him, distrust him. Even his allies begin to question him. Except one. Lan Wanzi. Lan Wangji sees what's happening. He understands the danger. And for the first time, he doesn't just follow rules. He reaches out. He warns Wei Wuxian, not as an enforcer, but as someone who cares. But Wei Wuxian? He refuses to stop. Because in his mind, this power is the only way to protect what matters. And that difference in belief creates a fracture, one that will only grow deeper. And now, everything is set in motion. Power, ideology, trust breaking apart piece by piece. Wei Wuxian is getting stronger. But at the same time, he's getting closer to the edge. And soon, there will be no turning back. The war reaches its peak. This is no longer scattered conflict. This is full-scale rebellion. The remaining clans unite, forming a resistance against the one clan. This war will later be remembered as the Sunshot Campaign. And at the center of it, Wei Wuxian. But not the version people remember. Not the villain. Not the monster. Right now, he's their greatest weapon. Using his control over resentful energy, he turns the battlefield into something terrifying. The dead rise. Spirits obey him. Enemies fall in waves. For the first time, the Invincible One clan begins to lose. But victory comes with a problem. A dangerous one. The same power that's saving them is starting to scare them. Other cultivators begin whispering. Is this really righteous? Are we winning, or becoming something worse? Because what Wei Wuxian is doing doesn't look like salvation. It looks like domination. And fear spreads faster than truth. Eventually, the impossible happens. The one clan falls. Their power is broken. Their leaders defeated. The war ends. And the world breathes again. But here's the irony. The same man who helped end the war now becomes the next problem. Because without a common enemy, people start looking for a new one. And Wei Wuxian is the easiest target. Among the ruins of war, there are survivors. Not soldiers. Not leaders. Civilians. Members of the one clan who never fought. Elderly people. Children. The weak. The forgotten. To the rest of the cultivation world, they are still enemies. Still guilty by association. Still disposable. But Wei Wuxian? He refuses to accept that. He protects them, defends them, takes responsibility for them. And in doing so, he makes a choice that will define his fate. Exiled, isolated, cut off from the world. Wei Wuxian retreats to a place no one dares to live. The burial mounds. A land filled with death, resentment, spiritual decay. A place where normal cultivators would lose their minds. But for him, this is where he thrives. This is where he builds something new. A sanctuary. For the unwanted. For the condemned. For the people the world threw away. This is the moment everything changes. Not just in reality, but in perception. Wei Wuxian is no longer seen as a hero. No longer an ally. No longer one of them. He becomes a symbol. A warning. A legend twisted by fear. The Yiling Patriarch. A man who commands the dead. A man who lives among corpses. A man who defies the natural order. But here's the truth no one acknowledges. He didn't change. The world's view of him did. Back in the cultivation world, things begin to shift. Rumors spread. Stories grow darker. Every action he takes gets distorted. Every decision questioned. Even his allies start distancing themselves. Not because they hate him, but because they're afraid. Afraid of what he's becoming. Afraid of what others will think. Afraid of being associated with him. And slowly, Wei Wuxian is left alone. But one person still hasn't let go.
Lan Wanji.
He finds Wei Wuxian in the burial mounds. Sees the life he's built. Sees the people he's protecting. And for a moment, there's no conflict. No arguments. Just understanding. But it doesn't last. Because Lan